Billionaire was virgin for 30 years until his poor maid said, "I'll give you 5 sons." For decades, a billionaire lived in silence, alone in his towering penthouse, untouched by love, haunted by secrets. But one night, his poor maid made him a promise that shattered his walls. "I'll give you 5 sons." What began as a moment of compassion soon spirals into something far deeper. When her little boy looks up at him and whispers, "Mommy says you're my daddy." He thought his heart was safe, but hidden truths from the past will rip open wounds neither of them expected. Her husband's death, his company's sins, their lives are bound together in ways too painful to ignore. Now he must choose. Cling to the empire he built on guilt, or risk everything for the family he never thought he deserved. Will love be enough to heal betrayal, or will the truth destroy them before their story even begins? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In the dim evening light of his Manhattan penthouse, Gabriel Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the glittering cityscape below. The clock on his mahogany desk softly chimed 8 o'clock, its gentle melody echoing through the vast, empty space. His dinner, a perfectly prepared salmon with roasted vegetables from his personal chef, sat barely touched on the custom-made dining table. The penthouse, worth $25 million, gleamed with pristine surfaces and carefully curated furniture. Italian leather sofas, hand-knotted Persian rugs, and modern art pieces worth small fortunes adorned the space. Yet despite the luxury surrounding him, Gabriel felt the familiar hollow ache in his chest. He pushed away from his plate and wandered into his home office, his footsteps silent on the marble floors. The wall behind his desk displayed an impressive collection of awards and achievements: Innovator of the Year, Tech Visionary, Business Leader of the Century. Each plaque and trophy caught the light, but their shine had long since dulled in Gabriel's eyes. The sound of quiet laughter drifted in from the dining room. Nicole, his evening maid, had arrived for her usual cleaning routine. Gabriel found himself drawn to the doorway, watching as she efficiently cleared away his hardly touched dinner. Her son, he couldn't remember the boy's name, sat cross-legged in the corner, hunched over a sketchbook, his pencil moving with careful concentration. "Mom, look!" The boy held up his drawing, his face bright with excitement. "I drew our cat sleeping in a funny position." Nicole paused her work, wiping her hands on her apron before moving to examine the sketch. Her warm smile lit up her entire face. "That's wonderful, sweetie. You captured her perfectly." She ruffled his hair affectionately, and the boy beamed under her praise. Gabriel felt something twist in his chest. The simple exchange between mother and son seemed to highlight everything missing from his own life. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had looked at him with such unconditional love, or when he'd felt the comfort of family warmth. Nicole noticed him standing there and straightened. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. We'll try to be quieter." "No need," Gabriel said stiffly, struggling to maintain his usual professional demeanor. "Carry on." He retreated to his bedroom, but their gentle murmurs and occasional soft laughter followed him. Later that night, Gabriel lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the mattress custom-made, yet sleep eluded him. His mind wandered back 30 years to when he was just 13 years old. The memory of his first crush, Sarah Matthews, and the cruel way she'd used him to win a bet with her friends. The humiliation had cut deep, cementing his decision to guard his heart. "I'll never let anyone hurt me like that again," he'd sworn then, young and wounded. Now, at 43 years old, that childhood vow had shaped his entire life. He'd thrown himself into his studies, then his business, building walls so high that no one could breach them. His virginity, preserved through 3 decades of self-imposed isolation, felt less like a choice and more like a prison. The sound of Nicole's earlier laughter echoed in his mind. She was a widow, he knew from her employment file, yet she still had the capacity for joy, still shared warm moments with her son. Meanwhile, he lay alone in his perfectly appointed bedroom, surrounded by wealth, but starved for genuine human connection. Gabriel rolled onto his side, pulling the expensive duvet tighter around himself. The city lights filtered through his windows, casting shadows on the wall. In the quiet darkness, he couldn't escape the truth. All his success, all his carefully maintained control, had left him with nothing but an empty heart and a growing awareness of everything he'd sacrificed in the name of protection. The gentle whir of the building's heating system filled the silence, and Gabriel closed his eyes, trying to remember the last time someone had touched him with genuine affection. Had it been his mother, before she passed away 15 years ago? He couldn't recall, and the realization made his chest ache. Nicole's presence in his home had begun to stir something in him, making him question the walls he'd built. Her quiet strength, the way she carried her grief while still remaining open to life's small joys, challenged everything he thought he knew about protecting oneself from pain. As midnight approached, Gabriel remained awake, his thoughts circling between past hurts and present loneliness. The pristine penthouse felt more like a museum than a home, preserved in perfect order, but lacking the warmth of life. He had achieved everything he'd set out to do professionally, but at what cost? The memory of 13-year-old Gabriel making that fateful vow seemed both distant and immediate. 3 decades of choosing isolation, of avoiding emotional entanglements, of building his empire while neglecting his heart, all stemming from a teenage girl's cruel joke. The realization felt heavy in his chest, a weight he'd carried for so long he'd almost forgotten it was there. In the darkness of his bedroom, surrounded by luxury but devoid of comfort, Gabriel Sterling faced the truth of his choices. His virginity, maintained for 30 years, wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was a symbol of all the connections he'd denied himself, all the chances at love and family he'd rejected in favor of safe, sterile success. The sound of the city below continued its constant hum, a reminder of the millions of lives being lived, connections being made, while he remained in his self-imposed fortress of solitude. Tomorrow would bring another day of meetings, decisions, and careful distance. But something had shifted inside him. The simple scene of Nicole and her son had cracked open a door he'd kept firmly shut for 30 years, letting in a glimmer of what might be possible if he found the courage to lower his walls. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gabriel Sterling's penthouse kitchen, casting long shadows across the marble countertops. Nicole had arrived earlier than usual, her son in tow, to prepare breakfast and start the day's bread-making. The familiar scent of coffee already filled the air as Gabriel emerged from his bedroom, drawn by the domestic sounds that had become part of his morning routine. He paused in the kitchen doorway, watching as Nicole's capable hands worked the dough on the floured surface. Her movements were methodical, yet gentle, pushing and folding with a rhythm that spoke of years of practice. Her son sat at the counter, his small legs swinging as he attempted to help, though more flour seemed to end up on his clothes than in the mixture. "Oops!" The boy's surprised giggle filled the kitchen as a cloud of white powder puffed into the air. Instead of scolding him, Nicole just smiled, reaching over to dust some flour off his nose. "That's okay, sweetheart. Sometimes the messiest baking sessions make the tastiest bread." Her voice was warm, patient, filled with a mother's love that made Gabriel's chest tighten with an unfamiliar ache. He must have made some small sound because Nicole looked up, catching his eye. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. Breakfast will be ready in 15 minutes. I hope you don't mind that we started the bread early today." "No, that's fine," Gabriel managed, his usual composure slightly rattled by the domestic scene before him. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had baked bread in his kitchen. The house staff his parents employed had always brought in pre-made items from approved bakeries. Nicole's son waved at him, leaving small flour handprints on the counter. "Hi, Mr. Sterling. Mum's teaching me how to make bread. Do you want to help?" Before Gabriel could formulate a response, thunder rumbled in the distance. The morning's bright start was giving way to dark clouds rolling in from the west, promising a significant storm. Gabriel's shoulders tensed automatically at the sound. "I have work to attend to," he said stiffly, retreating to his study. But he couldn't shake the image of Nicole's hands working the dough, the easy way she'd laughed with her son, the simple joy they found in each other's company. As the morning progressed, the storm grew more intense. Rain lashed against the windows, and lightning split the sky in brilliant flashes. Gabriel sat at his desk, trying to focus on quarterly reports, but each crack of thunder made his hands shake more violently. The memories he'd kept at bay for so long began to surface. Being trapped in his father's car during a massive storm, the windshield shattered by a falling branch, the terrifying hours waiting for rescue as thunder boomed around them. He was 8 years old again, helpless and afraid. His breathing became shallow, his vision tunneling. The expensive pen in his hand clattered to the desk as he gripped the edges of his chair, trying to anchor himself to reality. But the panic was overwhelming, washing over him in waves that matched the storm's intensity. He didn't hear the door open, didn't notice Nicole's presence until she was kneeling beside his chair. Her hands, still slightly dusty with flour, covered his trembling ones. "Breathe with me, Mr. Sterling," she said softly, her voice cutting through the roar in his ears. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. Just like that." Gradually, his breathing steadied, matching her calm rhythm. The panic began to recede, leaving him exhausted and embarrassed. He waited for the judgment, the awkward retreat. But Nicole remained beside him, her hands steady on his. "I used to be afraid of storms too," she shared quietly. "After my husband died, every crack of thunder felt like the world ending all over again. But then I realized something. We're not meant to weather our storms alone." Gabriel stared at her, struck by the compassion in her eyes. There was no pity there, no judgment, just understanding and something else he couldn't quite name. "You don't need to be alone anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. Then, with a gentle squeeze of his hands, she added words that shook him to his core. "I'll give you 5 sons if that's what it takes to heal your heart." The statement hung in the air between them, shocking in its directness, its promise. Gabriel felt as though all the oxygen had been pulled from the room. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Nicole stood slowly, smoothing her apron with slightly trembling hands. Without another word, she left the study, closing the door softly behind her. Gabriel remained frozen in his chair, his hands still tingling where she had touched them. The storm continued outside, but he barely noticed it now. His carefully constructed walls, maintained for 3 decades, had just been breached by a widow's gentle words and flour-dusted hands. The implications of her statement overwhelmed him. 5 sons, a family, connection, everything he'd denied himself out of fear and self-protection. His hands trembled now for entirely different reasons as he considered the possibility of a life filled with the warmth he'd witnessed in his kitchen that morning. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted under the study door, a tangible reminder of the life that existed beyond his self-imposed isolation. Gabriel sat there, letting the aroma wrap around him like a promise, as the storm gradually began to fade into the distance. The evening descended over Manhattan, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges that reflected off the glass-walled penthouse. Gabriel stood in his private dining room, his hand resting on the back of his usual chair. But something felt different tonight. The afternoon's vulnerability during the storm had shifted something inside him. The smell of home-cooked food drifted up from the kitchen below, and instead of waiting for his solitary meal to be brought up, Gabriel found himself walking down the stairs. His footsteps echoed in the stairwell, each step carrying him further from his familiar routine. When he pushed open the kitchen door, Nicole looked up from where she was setting plates on the small kitchen table. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by a warm smile that made his chest tighten. "Mr. Sterling," she said, straightening up. "I was just about to bring your dinner upstairs. I thought—" He cleared his throat, suddenly feeling awkward. "I thought perhaps I might join you and your son tonight, if that's acceptable." Nicole's son, who had been coloring at the table, looked up with bright eyes. "Really? You're going to eat with us?" The boy's enthusiasm made Gabriel's lips twitch into what might have been a smile. "If your mother doesn't mind." "Of course not," Nicole said quickly, already moving to set another place at the table. "We'd love to have you join us." Gabriel watched as she pulled out another chair, noting how her hands trembled slightly as she placed an extra plate. The kitchen table was nothing like his formal dining room upstairs. It was smaller, worn around the edges, with mismatched chairs that spoke of practicality over aesthetics, yet somehow it felt more inviting than any expensive furniture he owned. "We're having meatloaf," the boy announced proudly. "Mom makes the best meatloaf in the whole world." "Is that so?" Gabriel settled into the offered chair, feeling strangely out of place in his tailored suit among the homey kitchen surroundings. Nicole set the meatloaf in the center of the table, along with bowls of mashed potatoes and green beans. The food was simple but smelled delicious, so different from the elaborate but lonely meals he usually ate. "Would you like to say grace?" Nicole asked her son, who nodded enthusiastically. Gabriel watched as they both bowed their heads, and after a moment's hesitation, he did the same. The boy's prayer was simple and genuine, thanking God for the food and for Mr. Sterling eating with us tonight. The meal began quietly, but the boy soon filled the silence with chatter about his day at school, his latest drawings, and 1,000 other topics that spilled out in excited bursts. Gabriel found himself responding more and more, drawn into the child's infectious enthusiasm. "Do you like drawing too, Mr. Sterling?" the boy asked between bites of meatloaf. "I used to," Gabriel admitted, surprising himself with the confession. "When I was about your age." "Really? Can you show me sometime?" Before Gabriel could respond, he caught Nicole watching him with an expression that made his heart skip a beat, something soft and hopeful that reminded him of their moment in his study earlier that day. The conversation flowed more easily than Gabriel expected, punctuated by the clink of silverware and the boys' frequent laughter. The food was indeed excellent, but it was the warmth of the shared meal that truly satisfied something deep within him. As they finished eating, Nicole began gathering the dishes. Gabriel started to rise, feeling he should offer to help, but she gently waved him back to his seat. Her son remained at the table, pulling out his crayons again and starting a new drawing. That's when it happened. The boy looked up at Gabriel with innocent eyes and said the words that would shake his world. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The kitchen went absolutely still. Gabriel felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. Nicole dropped the dish she was holding into the sink with a clatter, spinning around with wide eyes. "Sweetheart, I never—" she started, her face flushing deep red. "But you said—" the boy began to protest. "That's enough." Nicole cut him off firmly but gently. Go get ready for bed, please. Right now. The boy gathered his crayons, looking confused and slightly hurt as he left the kitchen. Gabriel sat frozen in his chair, his mind spinning with the implications of those words. Had Nicole really said that? What did it mean? The memory of her words during his panic attack echoed in his mind. I'll give you 5 sons if that's what it takes to heal your heart. Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. Nicole said, her voice trembling. I never said that. I don't know why he would. It's fine. Gabriel said automatically, standing up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. Thank you for dinner. It was lovely. He fled the kitchen before she could respond, but instead of returning to his usual spaces, he found himself pushing open the door to his private balcony. The night air was cool against his face as he began to pace, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete. The lights of Manhattan sparkled below him, but Gabriel barely saw them. His mind was consumed with possibilities, with questions, with the way Nicole had looked at him across the kitchen table, with the easy warmth of her son's chatter. Back and forth he paced, loosening his tie as the night grew deeper. Had Nicole really told her son that? Or was it just a child's imagination? And if she had said it, what could it mean? Was it a slip of the tongue, a wishful thought spoken in an unguarded moment? Or was it something more? The memory of dinner kept replaying in his mind. The simple prayers, the shared laughter, the feeling of belonging he'd experienced for those brief moments. It had felt right in a way his solitary meals never had. But now that rightness was tangled up with confusion and uncertainty. Hours passed as Gabriel continued his restless pacing. The city lights below gradually dimmed as businesses closed for the night, but still he walked, trying to make sense of the evening's events and the unfamiliar emotions they had stirred in him. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gabriel's penthouse, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. He had barely slept, his mind too full of questions that needed answers. The sound of Nicole's arrival, the soft click of the service elevator, the quiet rustle of her movements in the kitchen, made his heart beat faster. He found her in the kitchen, already busy preparing breakfast. The familiar scent of coffee filled the air as she moved with practiced efficiency, her back turned to him as she worked at the counter. Nicole, Gabriel said softly, not wanting to startle her. Could we talk? She turned, and he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands twisted the dish towel she held. Of course, Mr. Sterling. About last night, I want to apologize again. Please. He interrupted gently, gesturing to the kitchen table. Sit with me. They sat across from each other, the morning light streaming between them. Gabriel noticed the shadows under Nicole's eyes and wondered if she had slept as poorly as he had. About what your son said. He began carefully, watching her face. I know you told me you didn't say those words to him, but I need to understand where they came from. Nicole's cheeks flushed, and she looked down at her hands folded on the table. He must have overheard me praying, she admitted quietly. I often pray in the evening, after he's supposed to be asleep. Sometimes he sneaks out of bed and listens. Gabriel felt something shift in his chest. Praying. Yes. She lifted her eyes to meet his, and there was a vulnerability there that made his throat tight. I pray for many things, Mr. Sterling, for strength to raise my son alone, for guidance in difficult times, and yes, I've prayed for God to send a father figure into our lives, someone who could show my boy what it means to be a good man. The weight of her words settled between them. Gabriel found himself leaning forward slightly, drawn by her honesty. My son misunderstood, she continued. Children hear things and make their own connections. I never told him you were his father. I would never presume—" "I understand," Gabriel said softly, though his heart was racing with emotions he couldn't quite name. A shadow crossed Nicole's face then, and she seemed to struggle with something internal. "Mr. Sterling, there's something else you should know." She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around each other. "Something I've been carrying for a long time." Gabriel waited, sensing the gravity in her voice. "Do you remember the Baldwin manufacturing plant in Pennsylvania? Your company acquired it 7 years ago." The question caught him off guard. "Yes, of course. It was one of our earlier acquisitions. You closed it 3 months later, laid off 437 workers." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the pain underneath. Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. "Nicole, my husband worked there," she continued, her eyes now bright with unshed tears. "He'd been there for 15 years. His father worked there before him. The whole town depended on that plant." The realization began to dawn on Gabriel, horror creeping through his veins. He remembered the acquisition clearly. It had been a strategic decision, made in boardrooms with spreadsheets and profit projections. He had never thought about the faces behind the numbers. When the plant closed, everything fell apart. Not just for us, but for the whole community. My husband tried to find work, but there was nothing else in town. We had to sell our house, move in with my parents. Nicole's voice cracked slightly. He started drinking. Not much at first, but then more and more. The depression set in. I tried to help him, but he couldn't see past the shame of not being able to provide for his family. Gabriel felt sick. He knew what was coming, but he couldn't stop her words. One night, after drinking too much, he drove his car into a tree. The police said it was an accident, but— She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I knew better. He'd left a note. He couldn't live with the failure anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel's mind raced through memories of board meetings where they had discussed the Baldwin acquisition. He remembered congratulating himself on the efficiency of the reorganization, on the cost savings that had pleased the shareholders. "I never knew," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The reports never showed." The reports wouldn't show the children who lost their homes, Nicole said quietly. Or the marriages that broke up under the strain, or the people who, like my husband, couldn't find a way to go on. Gabriel stood abruptly, turning to face the window. His reflection stared back at him, successful and wealthy in his tailored suit, while behind him sat a woman whose life he had unknowingly destroyed. "How?" He struggled to form the words. "How can you work for me? How can you even look at me?" He heard Nicole's chair scrape against the floor as she stood. "At first I couldn't," she admitted. "When I saw your name on the job listing, I almost didn't apply, but I needed the work, and something told me to take the chance." Gabriel turned back to face her, his eyes filled with anguish. "I'm so sorry, Nicole. I never meant to. I never thought about—" "I know," she said softly. "That's part of the problem, isn't it? The distance between decisions made in boardrooms and the lives they affect." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. How many other lives had his business decisions impacted? How many other families had been destroyed while he celebrated his success? "The money I've made," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's built on the ruins of lives like yours. Everything I have is an opportunity to do better," Nicole finished for him, "to make different choices going forward." Gabriel stared at her, amazed by the grace in her words. "How can you be so understanding?" "Because holding on to bitterness only destroys the vessel that contains it," she said. "I learned that the hard way. And because I've seen something in you these past months, Mr. Sterling, something that wants to change." The weight of guilt pressed down on Gabriel's shoulders, making it hard to breathe. The sterile luxury of his penthouse suddenly felt obscene. His awards and accolades mocked him from their shelves, each one possibly representing another family torn apart by his decisions. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said quietly. "Maybe not," Nicole agreed. "But you have it anyway. The question is, what will you do with it?" Gabriel Sterling sat in his home office, but for the first time in years, he couldn't focus on work. The morning's revelation about Nicole's husband haunted him. His computer screen displayed financial reports, but all he could see were the faces of people whose lives he had changed with a single signature. He pushed back from his desk and walked to the window, watching the sun crawl across the Manhattan skyline. The view that once filled him with pride now seemed to mock him. Each gleaming building represented another business decision, another acquisition, another restructuring that might have destroyed families like Nicole's. Memory after memory crashed over him. The Baldwin acquisition meeting played out in his mind with painful clarity. He remembered the boardroom, the polished mahogany table, the PowerPoint presentations with their neat columns of numbers. The redundancies will result in a 30% reduction in operating costs, the consultant had said, clicking through slides of graphs and projections. Redundancies, such a clean word for destroying people's livelihoods. Gabriel's hands clenched into fists. He'd nodded along, praised the efficiency of the plan. They'd celebrated afterward with expensive whiskey, toasting to their success while hundreds of families received pink slips. He wandered through his penthouse, unable to sit still. Every luxury item seemed to accuse him now. The Italian leather sofa probably cost what a factory worker made in 3 months. His watch could have paid someone's mortgage for a year. In his bedroom, he caught sight of his reflection in the full-length mirror. The successful businessman staring back at him looked like a stranger. How many children had gone hungry because of his decisions? How many marriages had crumbled under the weight of financial stress? How many people, like Nicole's husband, had lost not just their jobs, but their sense of purpose? The afternoon stretched endlessly. Gabriel tried to work, tried to read, tried to distract himself with television, but nothing could drown out the voice in his head that kept whispering, "You did this. You destroyed lives." As evening approached, he found himself drawn downstairs. He knew Nicole would be there, finishing her daily tasks before heading home. The sound of folding laundry led him to the small utility room. Nicole stood at a folding table, methodically working through a basket of clean linens. Her son sat on the floor nearby, coloring in a worn activity book. The domestic scene made Gabriel's chest ache, with a mixture of guilt and longing. "Nicole," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her hand still holding a partially folded sheet. "Mr. Sterling, did you need something?" Gabriel stepped into the room, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. I've been thinking about what you told me this morning, about the factory, about your husband." Nicole's hand stilled on the sheet, but she remained silent, waiting. "I've spent the day remembering all the decisions I've made over the years," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "All the times I signed off on layoffs or closures without thinking about the people involved. I told myself it was just business, that it was necessary for growth and efficiency." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "But that's no excuse. I should have considered the human cost. I should have looked for alternatives. I should have—" His voice broke, and he had to take a moment to compose himself. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I am so deeply sorry for what happened to your husband, to your family. I know I don't deserve it, but I have to ask, can you ever forgive me?" Nicole didn't answer immediately. She finished folding the sheet, adding it to the neat stack on the table. When she finally looked up at him, her eyes were filled with a complex mixture of emotions. Before she could speak, her son abandoned his coloring book and walked over to Gabriel. Without hesitation, the boy raised his arms in the universal child's gesture, asking to be picked up. Gabriel froze for a moment, then carefully lifted the child. The boy immediately settled against his chest, head resting on his shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'm sleepy," the boy mumbled, his small fingers curling into Gabriel's expensive shirt. Gabriel stood there, hardly daring to breathe, as the child's weight grew heavier. He looked at Nicole, expecting to see disapproval, or at least discomfort, but instead found her watching them with soft eyes. Moving carefully so as not to disturb the now sleeping child, Gabriel lowered himself into a nearby chair. His hand automatically went to the boy's hair, stroking the soft strands in a soothing rhythm. The simple act felt both foreign and achingly familiar, as if his body remembered something his mind had forgotten. The quiet moments stretched out, filled only with the sound of peaceful breathing. Gabriel continued to stroke the boy's hair, marveling at how completely the child trusted him. Despite everything he had done, despite the pain he had caused this family, this innocent boy saw something in him worth trusting. Nicole resumed folding laundry, but Gabriel caught her watching them from the corner of her eye. There was something different in her expression now, something that looked almost like hope. Sitting there in the warm quiet of the utility room, holding Nicole's sleeping son, Gabriel felt something shift inside him. The guilt didn't disappear. He knew it would take time to make peace with his past decisions. But it was joined by something else. A feeling of responsibility, of protectiveness, of wanting to be worthy of the trust this child had placed in him. He realized, with a mixture of terror and wonder, that he had already begun to think of this boy as someone he needed to protect and care for. Somewhere between their shared meals and quiet moments, between awkward conversations and honest confessions, he had started to feel like a father. The revelation should have frightened him, should have sent him running back to the safety of his solitary life. Instead, he found himself holding the boy a little closer, his thumb still making gentle circles in the child's soft hair. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gabriel Sterling's penthouse, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. He stood in his kitchen, watching the coffee maker's digital display count down the seconds, his mind unusually active for such an early hour. The events of the previous evening kept replaying in his thoughts. The weight of Nicole's sleeping son in his arms, the unexpected peace he'd felt, the way something fundamental had shifted inside him. He glanced at his watch. 6:45 in the morning. Nicole would arrive soon with her boy. His fingers drummed nervously against the counter. He'd barely slept, turning over this idea in his mind. For the first time in years, he wanted to share his space, his morning, his table with others. Right on. Schedule. He heard the quiet beep of the security system as Nicole used her entry code. The sound of small feet padding across the floor brought an involuntary smile to his face. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," Nicole called out, surprise evident in her voice at finding him in the kitchen rather than his office. "Good morning," he replied, turning to face them. The boy was holding his mother's hand, still looking sleepy but brightening at the sight of Gabriel. "I was wondering, would you both join me for breakfast? At the dining table?" Nicole's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, we couldn't impose. Please." Gabriel interrupted softly. "I'd like you to." The boy tugged at his mother's hand. "Can we, Mommy, please?" Nicole hesitated, looking between her son's hopeful face and Gabriel's uncertain one. Finally, she nodded. "If you're sure, Mr. Sterling." "Gabriel." he corrected gently. Please call me Gabriel, at least during breakfast. He led them to the formal dining room, where morning light sparkled off the crystal chandelier. The boy gasped at the sight, his eyes wide as he took in the elegant space. It's like a castle, he exclaimed, making both adults smile. I've never actually eaten here with company, Gabriel admitted, pulling out chairs for both of them. It always seemed too big for just one person. Nicole helped her son into his chair, while Gabriel went to the kitchen, returning with coffee for himself and Nicole and milk for the boy. Soon they settled into a comfortable rhythm, passing plates and sharing simple conversation. The boy, more awake now, couldn't contain his excitement. I had a dream about school last night, he announced, carefully handling his fork the way his mother had taught him. I was in the biggest classroom ever, and everyone had their own computer, and we were learning about space. Gabriel leaned forward, genuinely interested. Space. What did you learn about in your dream? All the planets and the stars. The boy's face lit up with enthusiasm. Did you know that Jupiter is so big you could fit 100 Earths inside it? Is that so? Gabriel asked, catching Nicole's warm smile from across the table. Uh-huh. And I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. Or maybe a teacher. Or maybe an astronaut who teaches other astronauts. Gabriel found himself chuckling, a sound that felt foreign but pleasant in his throat. Those all sound like excellent career choices. As they continued eating, Gabriel watched the easy interaction between mother and son. Nicole gently reminded her boy to use his napkin, helped him cut his pancakes into manageable pieces, and listened intently to every story he wanted to share. It was so different from his own sterile, morning routine of protein shakes and business news. When the plates were cleared, and the boy was contentedly drawing with crayons Nicole had produced from her bag, Gabriel gathered his courage. Nicole, he began, his voice uncertain. I've been thinking. Last night made me realize how limited my world has become. Everything in my life is scheduled, sanitized, and separate from real experience. He gestured around at the formal dining room. All of this wealth, and I don't even know how to truly live anymore. Nicole looked at him thoughtfully, waiting for him to continue. I was wondering if you would help me learn about the world beyond all this. He waved his hand at the expensive furnishings. Simple things, like cooking a meal from scratch, or taking a walk in the park without checking emails, or... He hesitated before adding, maybe even visiting your church someday. Nicole's expression softened, but she didn't answer immediately. She watched her son coloring for a moment before turning back to Gabriel. My world is very different from yours, she said carefully. There's nothing fancy about it. No 5-star restaurants or luxury cars, just simple meals, community gatherings, and faith. That's exactly what I want to learn about. Gabriel replied earnestly. I've spent so long hiding in this tower of mine, I've forgotten what real life feels like. Will you help me? Nicole studied his face, seeming to search for something in his expression. Whatever she saw there made her smile gently. All right, she agreed. But I should warn you. Once the church ladies find out you're interested in joining us, they'll never let you go. They've been praying for new members for months. Gabriel felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest at her acceptance. I think I'm ready to take that risk. The boy looked up from his drawing. Are you going to come to church with us? They have the best cookies after service. Is that so? Gabriel asked, amused by the child's priorities. Uh-huh. And Miss Sarah lets me help arrange the flowers sometimes, and Mr. Joe teaches us songs and... As the boy continued listing all the wonderful things about his church community, Gabriel caught Nicole's eye. She was watching him with a mixture of caution and hope, as if she could see something in him that he couldn't yet see himself. The morning light continued to stream through the windows, warming the room and casting a golden glow over their little gathering. Gabriel realized that for the first time in years, his massive dining room didn't feel empty. Instead, it felt like it was finally being used for its true purpose, bringing people together, sharing meals and stories, creating connections that went beyond the surface of wealth and status. He listened to the boys' cheerful chatter, watched Nicole's gentle corrections and encouragements, and felt something inside him continue to soften and change. The transformation that had begun the night before, holding a sleeping child in his arms, was continuing in the simple act of sharing breakfast and making plans for a different kind of future. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Gabriel Sterling felt truly hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as Gabriel's luxury car pulled into Nicole's neighborhood. He felt distinctly out of place in his tailored suit, like a peacock among sparrows. Children played hopscotch on chalk-drawn squares, and elderly couples sat on worn front porches, their keen eyes following the unfamiliar vehicle. "This is my world," Nicole said softly from the passenger seat, her son bouncing excitedly in the back. "It's not much, but it's home." Gabriel parked the car, feeling self-conscious as he stepped out onto the cracked concrete. The streets here were narrow, lined with modest houses sporting small, well-tended gardens. Window boxes overflowed with bright geraniums, and American flags fluttered from several porches. It was a far cry from the sterile luxury of his penthouse world. "Can we go to the park first, Mommy?" Nicole's son called out, already tugging at her hand. "I want to show Mr. Gabriel the fountain." Nicole smiled. "If that's all right with Mr. Gabriel?" Gabriel nodded, loosening his tie. "Lead the way." The park was small but well-loved, with ancient oak trees providing patches of dappled shade. A simple fountain burbled at its center, surrounded by wooden benches weathered gray by countless seasons. Children shrieked with laughter on the playground equipment, while parents watched from nearby seats. "Look, hot dogs!" the boy exclaimed, pointing to a cart where an elderly vendor was serving customers. The savory aroma of grilled meat and onions wafted towards them. "Would you like one?" Gabriel asked, reaching for his wallet. Nicole started to protest, but Gabriel shook his head. "Please, let me do this small thing." They approached the cart, where the vendor greeted them with a gap-toothed smile. "Well, if it isn't young Tommy. The usual for you, sport." "Yes, please, Mr. Frank, with lots of ketchup." Gabriel watched in fascination as the vendor, Frank, prepared their hot dogs with practiced efficiency, adding condiments with a flourish. The simple paper-wrapped meals cost less than Gabriel's morning coffee, yet the joy on Tommy's face was worth more than any expensive restaurant meal. They found an empty bench near the fountain, where Tommy immediately began attacking his hot dog with enthusiasm. Gabriel watched the children playing, their uninhibited laughter stirring something long dormant in his chest. "I used to come to a park like this," he said quietly. "Before everything. My mother would bring me on Saturdays." Nicole glanced at him, careful not to push, but leaving space for him to continue if he wished. After she died, Father said parks were for common people. He had a private playground installed at home instead. Gabriel took a bite of his hot dog, savoring the simple, honest flavors. It wasn't the same. "Mr. Gabriel," Tommy called out, having finished his food in record time. "Do you know how to skip stones?" "I'm afraid not," Gabriel admitted. "I'll teach you." Tommy grabbed his hand, pulling him towards the fountain's edge. "You have to find flat ones like this." Gabriel allowed himself to be led, aware of Nicole watching them with gentle amusement. Tommy demonstrated the proper technique, his small arm flicking sideways to send a pebble dancing across the water's surface. Gabriel's first attempt sank immediately, creating an ungraceful splash. Tommy giggled but encouraged him to try again. "You have to throw it like this," he demonstrated once more. After several attempts, Gabriel managed to make a stone skip twice. The simple achievement brought a surprised laugh from his throat. "I did it. See, you're getting better." Tommy beamed up at him, and Gabriel felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. As the afternoon wore on, more families arrived at the park. Gabriel noticed how they greeted Nicole with familiar waves and friendly calls. This was a real community, where people knew each other's names and stories. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Nicole gathered them together. "We should head to the church now. Evening prayer service will be starting soon." The church was a modest brick building with a simple white steeple reaching toward the darkening sky. Gabriel hesitated at the entrance, suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd attended any religious service. "It's okay," Nicole assured him softly. "Just come as you are." Inside, the wooden pews were worn smooth from years of use. Stained glass windows caught the last rays of sunlight, casting colored shadows across the floor. The congregation was small, perhaps 30 people, but their voices filled the space with warm greetings. "Nicole, so good to see you, dear." An elderly woman approached, her eyes twinkling as she noticed Gabriel. "And who might this be?" "This is my employer, Mr. Sterling." Nicole introduced him. "He asked to join us this evening." "Welcome, welcome." The woman clasped his hand in both of hers. "I'm Sarah. We're so pleased to have you with us." Others approached, each offering genuine welcomes that made Gabriel's usual social defenses feel unnecessary. Tommy ran off to join other children his age, completely at ease in this familiar environment. The service itself was simple but moving. No elaborate choir or orchestral accompaniment, just honest voices raised in song and heartfelt prayers offered without pretense. Gabriel found himself affected by the raw sincerity of it all. When the minister invited people to share their prayers and thanksgivings, various members stood to speak. Their concerns were ordinary yet profound: a neighbor's illness, a child's graduation, a new job, a lost pet found. Each speaker was met with murmurs of support and understanding. Gabriel listened, struck by how these people carried each other's burdens and celebrated each other's joys. In his world of corporate politics and calculated relationships, such genuine connection was rare. As the service concluded, people lingered to chat and share news. Children darted between the pews, their parents calling out gentle reminders to walk, not run. Gabriel observed it all, feeling simultaneously out of place and strangely at home. "Cookie?" Tommy appeared at his side, offering half of his post-service treat. Gabriel accepted it with gravity, recognizing the significance of a child willing to share such a precious commodity. "Thank you, Tommy." The drive back to the penthouse was quiet, Tommy having fallen asleep in the back seat. The city lights created a familiar glow against the night sky, but Gabriel saw them differently now. Behind each window might be a family sharing dinner, a child learning to read, a community supporting one another. As they pulled into his building's garage, Gabriel realized something had shifted within him. The emptiness that had been his constant companion for decades felt less overwhelming. In its place was something new, not quite belonging, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. "Thank you," he said softly to Nicole as they rode the elevator up, "for sharing your world with me today." Nicole adjusted her sleeping son in her arms. "Thank you for wanting to see it." The elevator doors opened to his penthouse, all chrome and glass and expensive emptiness. But for the first time in as long as he could remember, Gabriel Sterling felt truly alive. The simple pleasures of the day, hot dogs in the park, skipping stones with Tommy, the warmth of the congregation had awakened something he thought long dead. He watched as Nicole carried Tommy to their quarters, the boy's peaceful face illuminated by the city lights streaming through the windows. For the first time, his massive penthouse didn't feel like a fortress protecting him from the world. Instead, it felt like a space waiting to be filled with something more valuable than all his wealth, real human connection. The days that followed brought a gentle transformation to the Sterling penthouse. What was once a museum-like space of pristine surfaces and echoing silence gradually filled with the warm sounds of life and learning. In the expansive kitchen one morning, Gabriel stood beside Nicole, attempting to follow her instructions for making French toast. His usually steady hands fumbled with the egg, creating a mess on the counter. "Like this," Nicole demonstrated, cracking an egg with one hand. "It takes practice." Gabriel's next attempt sent shell fragments into the bowl. "I've never been particularly domestic," he admitted, cheeks flushing. "My expertise tends toward circuit boards, not cooking boards." Nicole laughed softly, fishing out the shells with a spoon. "Everyone starts somewhere. Tommy couldn't even reach the counter 2 years ago, and now he's my best helper." As if summoned, Tommy bounded into the kitchen, still in his pajamas. "Can I show Mr. Gabriel how to dip the bread?" "Certainly." Nicole smiled. "Just remember, don't drip on the floor," Tommy finished, climbing onto his step stool. He took the bread slice from Gabriel's hands. "Watch me. You got to be quick but careful, like this." His small hands demonstrated the perfect technique. Gabriel watched intently, treating the lesson with the same concentration he'd give to a board meeting. When his next attempt succeeded, Tommy's proud grin warmed something deep in his chest. The evenings brought their own kind of education. Tommy introduced Gabriel to the world of card games, starting with Go Fish and working up to Crazy Eights. Gabriel, who could process complex algorithms in his head, found himself thoroughly challenged by a 7-year-old's card strategy. "Do you have any threes?" Tommy asked, his face serious with concentration. "Go Fish," Gabriel replied, watching the boy's dramatic sigh as he drew another card. Nicole, folding laundry nearby, couldn't help but smile at the sight of the billionaire tech mogul sitting cross-legged on the floor, completely absorbed in a children's card game. In return, Gabriel began sharing his own knowledge. He set up a simple coding program on his tablet, teaching Tommy basic commands that made colorful shapes appear on the screen. "See, if we change this number here," Gabriel pointed, "the square gets bigger." Tommy's eyes widened as he watched the shape transform. "Cool. Can we make it purple?" "Absolutely. Let me show you how to input color values." These moments of shared discovery filled the penthouse with a new energy. Laughter bounced off walls that had known only silence. The sound of footsteps replaced the sterile quiet. Even the sophisticated security system began recognizing Tommy's excited running as a normal pattern rather than an intrusion alert. One particularly warm evening, after a day spent teaching Tommy about binary code and learning from him about the proper way to build a pillow fort, Gabriel found himself on the balcony. The city stretched out below, a tapestry of lights and life he'd always observed from a distance. Nicole joined him, bringing 2 cups of tea. "Tommy finally crashed on the couch," she said softly. "All that coding wore him out." Gabriel accepted the tea with a quiet thank you. "I never imagined my penthouse could contain so much life." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city pulse beneath them. After a while, Gabriel spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Would you like to see something?" At Nicole's nod, he led her to the living room where Tommy lay sleeping on the couch, his small form peaceful in the dim light. The boy had insisted on wearing his new coding glasses. Empty frames Gabriel had given him as a joke, which Tommy now treated as essential programming equipment. "Look at him," Gabriel said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "So completely at peace, so full of love and curiosity and joy." He swallowed hard. "I envy that, Nicole. I envy the life you have in him, that sense of love and purpose. All my success, all this wealth, it means nothing compared to what you share with your son." Nicole turned to face him, her eyes gentle in the city light streaming through the windows. "Love isn't something to envy, Gabriel," she said softly, using his first name for the first time. "It's something to give. It's a choice we make every day, with every action." Gabriel looked at her then, really looked at her. The soft curves of her face, the wisdom in her eyes, the strength in her gentle hands. Something shifted in his perception, like a lens finally coming into focus. This wasn't just his employee standing before him. This was a woman of extraordinary grace and resilience. A woman who had every reason to hate him for his past actions, but had chosen to show him kindness instead. He realized with sudden clarity that she was the answer to prayers he hadn't even known he was making. All those lonely nights, all those empty moments of success, he had been waiting for this, for someone who could teach him how to open his heart again. Tommy stirred slightly in his sleep, mumbling something about purple squares. Nicole moved to adjust the throw blanket over him, her movements full of natural maternal grace. Gabriel watched them both, feeling the walls around his heart continue to crumble. The penthouse that had once been his fortress of solitude was becoming something else entirely. A home. And these two people, who had entered his life through the humblest of circumstances, were teaching him what it truly meant to live. The city continued its nighttime symphony beyond the windows, but inside, in the quiet of this moment, Gabriel Sterling found himself learning the most important lesson of his life. That love, true love, wasn't about what you could get, but what you were willing to give. Gabriel Sterling adjusted his bow tie for the third time, studying his reflection in the floor-length mirror. The familiar black tuxedo felt different tonight, perhaps because his heart was racing with anticipation rather than dread at the thought of another social function. His fingers brushed against the small velvet box in his pocket. The weight of it seemed to ground him, reminding him of everything that had changed in the past few weeks. He took a deep breath, remembering Tommy's words from earlier that afternoon. "Take care of Mommy tonight," the boy had said seriously, pushing his glasses up his nose in an unconscious imitation of Gabriel's own gesture. The trust in those young eyes had nearly undone him. The doorbell chimed, and Gabriel hurried to answer it. Sarah, the babysitter he'd carefully vetted, stood there with a warm smile. She was a grandmother figure from Nicole's church, someone Tommy already knew and trusted. "Come in, please," Gabriel said, leading her to where Tommy was watching cartoons. He's already had dinner, and Nicole left detailed instructions in the kitchen. Tommy barely looked up from his show, too, engrossed in the animated characters, to pay much attention to the adults. Sarah settled into an armchair, pulling out her knitting, and Gabriel felt some of his anxiety ease. This was exactly the comfortable, homey atmosphere he'd hoped for. Upstairs, he could hear movement in the guest room, where Nicole was getting ready. Earlier that day, he'd arranged for a stylist to help her prepare, along with delivering a selection of designer gowns. He remembered her protests when he'd first asked her to accompany him to the charity gala. "Gabriel, I can't," she'd said, wringing her hands. "I don't belong in that world." "You belong wherever you choose to be," he'd responded quietly. "And I choose to have you by my side tonight." Now, waiting in the living room, he paced nervously. The charity gala wasn't just another social obligation. It was his opportunity to publicly declare the changes he was implementing in his company. Changes inspired by Nicole's story and her impact on his life. The sound of heels on hardwood made him turn. Nicole stood at the top of the stairs, and Gabriel felt his breath catch in his throat. She wore a midnight blue gown that seemed to capture starlight itself. The fabric flowed like water, highlighting her natural grace. Her hair was styled in elegant waves, and subtle makeup enhanced her features without masking them. But it was her eyes that captured him, bright with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "You look..." Gabriel struggled to find words adequate to express what he was feeling. "Absolutely beautiful." A blush colored her cheeks as she carefully descended the stairs. "The dress is beautiful," she demurred. "The dress is just fabric," Gabriel said softly. "You're what makes it beautiful." Tommy finally looked up from his cartoon and gasped, "Mommy, you look like a princess!" Nicole laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension. She knelt carefully in her gown to hug her son. "Be good for Miss Sarah, okay? I left your favorite bedtime story on your pillow." "I will," Tommy promised. Then he turned to Gabriel with that serious expression again. "Remember what I said." Gabriel nodded solemnly. "I promise." The drive to the gala venue was quiet, filled with anticipation. Gabriel could sense Nicole's nervousness in the way she smoothed her dress repeatedly. "You don't have to worry," he assured her. "Just be yourself. That's more than enough." She smiled at him gratefully. "I've never been to anything like this before." "Neither have I," he said, causing her to look at him in surprise. "Oh, I've attended hundreds of galas, but never with someone who matters to me." The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegant table settings, while floating candles created an almost magical atmosphere. As they approached the entrance, Gabriel offered his arm to Nicole. "Ready?" She took a deep breath and placed her hand in the crook of his elbow. "Ready?" The moment they entered, heads turned. Gabriel was used to attention at these events, but this was different. People weren't just looking at him, they were seeing them together, and the contrast between this and his usual solitary appearance was striking. Whispers followed them across the room. Gabriel could feel Nicole tensing slightly beside him, so he covered her hand with his own, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Gabriel!" A board member approached them. "We weren't sure you'd make it tonight. And who is this lovely lady?" "This is Nicole," Gabriel said proudly. "She's changed my life in ways I'll be explaining shortly." They made their way through the crowd, stopping for brief introductions. Gabriel noticed how Nicole's natural warmth and genuine interest in others quickly won people over. She listened intently to stories, asked thoughtful questions, and showed the same compassion to billionaires that she did to everyone else. Finally, it was time for the speeches. As the charity's largest donor, Gabriel was expected to address the crowd. He kissed Nicole's hand before making his way to the podium, feeling the weight of the ring box with each step. "Good evening," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "Many of you have known me for years as a businessman focused solely on profit and growth. Tonight, I stand before you as someone transformed." He paused, finding Nicole's eyes in the crowd. "Recently, I learned that one of our past corporate decisions, a factory closure that looked good on paper, led to devastating consequences for real people. One of those people was the late husband of an extraordinary woman who, through God's grace, came into my life as my housekeeper." The room had grown completely silent. "Nicole showed me what true strength looks like, She had every reason to hate me, yet she chose to show kindness. She taught me that success isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the good we do. Gabriel's voice grew stronger. Tonight, I'm announcing a complete overhaul of Sterling Tech's policies. We're establishing a worker support program, funding job retraining initiatives, and creating a foundation to help families affected by corporate downsizing. From now on, we will prioritize compassion over profit. Applause burst out, but Gabriel held up his hand. I'm not finished. He stepped down from the podium and walked to where Nicole stood. Her eyes were shining with tears. Nicole, he said, taking her hands in his. You and Tommy have taught me what really matters in life. You've shown me that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in the love we share and the lives we touch. The room fell silent again as Gabriel lowered himself to one knee. Nicole's hands flew to her mouth as he pulled out the velvet box. You've already given me so much, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the love you and Tommy have shown me? Through tears, Nicole nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes. The ballroom erupted in applause as Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to embrace her. The diamond sparkled, but it couldn't match the light in Nicole's eyes as she looked up at him. Tommy's going to be so excited, she said softly, making Gabriel laugh. I already asked for his permission, he admitted. He made me promise to take care of you tonight, remember? Nicole's laugh mixed with her happy tears as she reached up to touch his face. You already do. You take care of both of us. The orchestra began playing again, and Gabriel led his fiancée onto the dance floor. As they swayed to the music, surrounded by well-wishers but lost in their own world, both knew that this was just the beginning of their extraordinary journey together. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows, but its warmth couldn't reach the chill that settled over Gabriel Sterling as he stared at the newspaper spread across his desk. His hands trembled as he read the bold headline, Tech Mogul's Empire Built on Broken Lives, the True Cost of Sterling's Success. The article was devastating in its detail. Page after page chronicled the systematic dismantling of entire communities, with Nicole's hometown of Mill Valley featured prominently. The reporter had done thorough research, tracking the ripple effects of Sterling Tech's factory closures. Businesses that failed, homes foreclosed, families torn apart. And there, in black and white, was the story of Thomas Harper, Nicole's late husband. The article detailed his descent into depression after losing his job, the mounting bills, the final tragic night when despair overwhelmed him. Gabriel's throat tightened as he read quotes from former co-workers describing Thomas as a dedicated family man who just couldn't bear letting his wife and son down. The sound of a phone buzzing interrupted his thoughts. His security team was calling. Sir, there are reporters gathering outside the building. They're requesting comments on the exposé. Gabriel walked to the window. Sure enough, a crowd had formed on the sidewalk below, television vans with satellite dishes parked along the curb. He could see camera flashes even from 40 floors up. The elevator dinged, and Gabriel's heart sank. Nicole would have seen the papers by now. He turned to face her, and the look in her eyes told him everything. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her engagement ring, but her hand was clenched into a fist. Her face, usually so warm and forgiving, was pale with shock and hurt. Is it true? She whispered. All of it? Gabriel stepped toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. Please, just answer the question. Yes. He admitted, his voice hoarse. The factory closures, the layoffs, they were all my decisions. You knew, Nicole said. When I told you about Thomas, about how the closure affected us, You knew it was more than just one factory. You knew you'd destroyed an entire town. I was ashamed, Gabriel stammered. I couldn't find the words to tell you the full extent. Couldn't find the words? Nicole's voice cracked. For 2 months, we've been building something. I've been falling in love with you, trusting you, believing you'd changed. And all this time, you were hiding the truth. Nicole, please. Gabriel moved toward her again. What I felt, what I feel for you and Tommy, it's real. I know I should have told you everything, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing me? She gave a bitter laugh. Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't eventually learn how my husband was just one of hundreds of lives you ruined? The elevator dinged again, and Tommy ran out, his backpack bouncing. Mommy! Mr. Gabriel, did you see all the people downstairs? They're taking pictures! Nicole quickly wiped her eyes, turning to her son with forced composure. Tommy, sweetie, go pack your overnight bag. We're going to stay at Aunt Sarah's for a while. The boy's face fell. But why? I thought we were going to live here now. Mr. Gabriel said, Tommy. Nicole's voice was firm but gentle. Please do as I ask. As Tommy reluctantly headed to his room, Gabriel felt panic rising in his chest. Nicole, don't do this. We can work through this. I'll make it right. I'll set up a foundation, rebuild the town. You can't rebuild lives, Gabriel. Nicole said quietly, twisting the engagement ring off her finger. You can't bring Thomas back. You can't undo the nights I spent holding my crying son, wondering how we'd survive. She placed the ring on his desk, the diamond catching the morning light. I forgave you for Thomas because I believed you didn't understand the full impact of your decisions. But you did. You knew exactly what you were doing, and you hid it from me. I love you. Gabriel's voice broke. Both of you, please. Love requires trust. Nicole said, How can I build a future with someone who kept such a huge part of our past hidden? How can I explain to Tommy that the man who helped destroy his father's life wants to be his new father? Tommy returned with his backpack, looking confused and worried. Nicole took his hand, leading him towards the elevator. She paused at the doors, turning back one last time. I thought God brought you into our lives for healing, she said softly. But maybe he brought us into yours to show you the true cost of your choices. I hope you find peace, Gabriel, but I can't build my future on such painful ashes. The elevator doors closed, taking them away. Gabriel stood frozen, staring at the space where they had been, until his legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair, the newspaper headlines swimming before his eyes. Outside, camera flashes continued to light up the morning sky. Reporters called his name from the street below. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from his PR team, board, members, journalists. But Gabriel heard none of it. All he could hear was the echo of the elevator doors closing, the sound of his chants at love and redemption slipping away. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The penthouse, which had briefly known the warmth of family and laughter, felt colder and emptier than ever before. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, but for Gabriel Sterling, all light had gone out of the world. The ring sat on his desk, a glittering reminder of dreams shattered by the weight of unspoken truths. In the silence of his penthouse, Gabriel faced the full magnitude of his past choices and the devastating cost of his failures, not just in dollars and cents, but in broken hearts and shattered lives. His phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. The empire he'd built, the wealth he'd accumulated, the power he'd achieved, it all meant nothing now. He had lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered, the chance to be loved, to be forgiven, to build a family from the ashes of past mistakes. Outside his window, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside, time seemed to stand still. Gabriel Sterling, the man who had finally learned to open his heart, sat alone in his fortress of wealth and success, surrounded by everything and left with nothing. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gabriel Sterling's penthouse, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. The silence pressed against his ears like a physical weight as he sat alone at his massive dining table, staring at the untouched breakfast before him. The perfectly arranged plate of eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, prepared exactly the way Nicole used to make it, had gone cold, just like everything else in his life. His fingers traced the polished wood of the table, remembering how just days ago it had been filled with the cheerful chatter of Tommy explaining his latest school project, Nicole's gentle laughter echoing through the space. Now the emptiness felt suffocating. Gabriel picked up his fork, then set it down again. His appetite had vanished the moment Nicole and Tommy had left. The newspaper that had destroyed everything lay folded beside his plate, its damning headlines still visible. Tech mogul's past devastation, the true cost of Sterling Industries' success. He pushed away from the table, his chair scraping against the floor with an harsh sound that seemed to mock the previous warmth of family meals shared in this space. Walking through the penthouse, every corner held memories that now felt like daggers to his heart. The kitchen where Nicole had taught him to knead bread, flour dusting their clothes as they laughed. The living room where Tommy had fallen asleep in his lap, trusting and innocent. The balcony where he and Nicole had shared quiet evening conversations, planning a future that now lay in ruins. His home office, once his sanctuary, offered no comfort. Multiple screens displayed urgent messages from his executive team, PR crisis managers, and board members. They all wanted direction, statements, damage control. Gabriel couldn't focus on any of it. The words blurred before his eyes as memories of Nicole's final words echoed in his mind. Love requires trust. He attempted to read through urgent reports, but after reading the same paragraph 5 times without comprehending a single word, he gave up. The laughter that had briefly filled these halls haunted him now, phantom sounds that made him turn his head, hoping to see Tommy running around a corner or Nicole smiling from a doorway. The afternoon stretched endlessly. Gabriel paced his penthouse like a caged animal, picking up objects only to set them down again. A crayon Tommy had left behind, a novel Nicole had been reading during her breaks, small pieces of the life that had almost been his. As evening approached, Gabriel found himself unable to bear the silence any longer. He grabbed his car keys, taking the private elevator down to the parking garage. The media circus outside the building had thinned, but not disappeared entirely. A few persistent photographers captured his exit, but he barely noticed them. He drove without conscious thought, his expensive car carrying him through the city streets until he found himself in Nicole's modest neighborhood. The familiar surroundings made his heart ache. The small park where they'd skipped stones, the church where he'd first felt a glimmer of peace, the street vendor who'd taught him the simple joy of a hot dog with everything on it. Parking his car at a discreet distance, Gabriel watched as Nicole and Tommy emerged from the elementary school. Tommy wore his favorite blue backpack, bouncing as he walked and gesturing animatedly about something. Even from this distance, Gabriel could imagine his excited chatter about his day at school. Nicole held his hand, nodding and smiling at whatever story he was sharing. The sight of them together, walking home in the golden evening light, created a physical ache in Gabriel's chest. He gripped his steering wheel tightly, fighting the urge to step out, to run to them, to beg for another chance. But he knew he couldn't. Not yet. Not like this. He watched as they stopped at the corner store, emerging with what looked like a small bag of groceries. Tommy skipped alongside his mother, occasionally turning to walk backward while talking to her. their easy affection, their simple joy in each other's company. It was everything Gabriel had briefly tasted and lost. As they disappeared around a corner toward their apartment building, Gabriel remained parked, staring at the spot where they'd been. The evening light faded, street lamps flickering to life one by one. A simple apology wouldn't be enough. He knew that now. The damage he'd done went far deeper than just hiding the truth from Nicole. His company's actions had torn apart an entire community, destroyed countless lives like Thomas's, created ripples of pain that were still affecting people today. His phone buzzed again, probably another crisis management call, but he ignored it. In the growing darkness, Gabriel sat in his car, surrounded by the neighborhood where Nicole had shown him what real life looked like, where she'd taught him that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in moments of connection, in genuine laughter, in the trust between people who loved each other. The street grew quieter as night approached. A few people hurried past, heading home to their families. Through a nearby window, Gabriel could see a family sitting down to dinner together, their faces animated in conversation. The scene reminded him painfully of the meals he'd shared with Nicole and Tommy, of the family he'd almost had. He started his car but couldn't bring himself to leave just yet. Light spilled from the windows of Nicole's apartment building, and he imagined them inside, Tommy doing homework at the kitchen table, Nicole preparing a simple dinner. The life he'd glimpsed, the love he'd almost grasped, now felt as distant as the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. A gentle rain began to fall, drops sliding down his windshield like tears. Gabriel sat there, a wealthy man in an expensive car, watching the lights of a modest apartment building and understanding that all his billions couldn't buy what he truly needed. He couldn't simply throw money at this problem, couldn't fix it with a grand gesture or a charitable donation. The path to redemption, if one existed, would require something far more fundamental, a complete transformation of who he was and how he conducted business. The rain fell harder now, drumming against his car roof. In the growing darkness, Gabriel finally put his car in drive, but his heart remained behind. In the warm light of Nicole's windows, in the echoes of Tommy's laughter, in the memory of almost happiness that now felt like a dream he'd woken from too soon. Gabriel straightened his tie as he strode into Sterling Tech's gleaming headquarters. The morning sun reflected off the glass and steel building, but he barely noticed its familiar grandeur. His mind was focused on the task ahead, perhaps the most important board meeting of his career. "Mr. Sterling." His assistant Martha greeted him, hurrying to keep up with his determined pace. "The board members are already gathering. They're not happy about the emergency meeting." "They're about to be a lot less happy," Gabriel muttered, adjusting the folder of documents in his hands. The boardroom fell silent as Gabriel entered. 12 faces turned towards him, a mix of confusion and annoyance evident in their expressions. These were people he'd worked with for years, people who'd helped build Sterling Tech into the empire it was today, and they were about to witness its biggest transformation yet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gabriel began, standing at the head of the long mahogany table. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I've called this meeting because I'm making some significant changes to our company's direction." He opened his folder, distributing documents to each board member. "I'm selling 30% of my personal shares in Sterling Tech." The reaction was immediate. Charles Davidson, the longest-serving board member, nearly choked on his coffee. "You're what?" "Selling my shares," Gabriel repeated firmly, "and liquidating several of my personal assets. The funds will be used to rebuild the factory we closed in Millbrook 10 years ago." The room erupted in protests. "Have you lost your mind? This is corporate suicide. The shareholders will revolt." Gabriel raised his hand for silence. "The decision is made. The paperwork is already being processed. Patricia Chen, the chief financial officer, leaned forward. Gabrielle, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. The Millbrook closure was a sound business decision. It improved our bottom line significantly and destroyed countless lives in the process. Gabriel countered. His voice grew softer but more intense. We measured success in profit margins while families lost their homes, while children went hungry, while good people— He paused, thinking of Nicole's late husband. While good people lost hope. This is about that maid, isn't it? Charles said dismissively. The widow, whose story made the papers. Gabriel, you can't let a personal relationship cloud your business judgment. Gabriel's eyes flashed. This isn't about one person. It's about doing what's right. About understanding that a fortune built on broken families isn't a fortune at all. It's a debt. And it's time we paid it back. He clicked a remote, and projections appeared on the wall screen. These are the initial plans: a new manufacturing facility, updated with current technology, a community center, educational scholarships for the children of displaced workers, job training programs, small business grants. The board members studied the figures in stunned silence. Finally, Patricia spoke again. Gabrielle, even if we support this, and I'm not saying we do, the PR nightmare alone could sink us. Admitting fault, taking responsibility for decade-old decisions. Sometimes, Gabriel said quietly. Admitting our mistakes is the only way to move forward. I've learned that the hard way. For the next 2 hours, Gabriel defended his plan against every objection. He had answers ready for their concerns about shareholder value, market perception, and legal implications. He'd spent the entire night preparing, fueled by coffee and the burning need to make things right. As the meeting drew to a close, most of the board members filed out in shocked silence. Only Charles remained behind, shaking his head. You're throwing away everything we built, everything your father built, for what? Conscience? Redemption? Love? Gabriel gathered his papers slowly. I'm not throwing anything away, Charles. I'm finally building something real. Alone in his office afterward, Gabriel began the detailed work of bringing his vision to life. His computer screen filled with architectural plans for the community center, a modern building with classrooms, a library, counseling offices, and a daycare center. He drafted outlines for scholarship programs, considering how to ensure they reached the families who needed them most. As evening approached, the city lights began twinkling outside his window. Gabriel's desk was covered with papers, legal documents, financial projections, construction permits. His hands were trembling slightly from too much coffee and too little food, but he couldn't stop. Not yet. He opened a new document and began typing. Dear residents of Millbrook. The letter would go to every family affected by the factory closure. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would be a start, an acknowledgement of their pain, a promise to do better. The office had grown dark, lit only by his desk lamp and computer screen. Gabriel leaned back in his chair, exhausted but oddly peaceful. For the first time since Nicole had left, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. Looking out at the city skyline, Gabriel did something he hadn't done in years. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer. God, he said softly, I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but please, let this sacrifice bring healing, not just to Nicole and Tommy, but to all the families we hurt. Help me use what I have to make things right. His voice cracked on the last words. In the quiet of his office, surrounded by the plans for redemption he'd drafted, Gabriel Sterling, billionaire, tech mogul, lonely man, bowed his head and let his tears fall freely for the first time in decades. The papers on his desk held the blueprint for a different kind of legacy. Not one measured in stock prices and market share, but in restored hopes and healed hearts. Tomorrow would bring more battles with the board, more logistical challenges, more hard decisions. But tonight, in the stillness of his office, Gabriel knew with absolute certainty that he was finally doing what he should have done long ago. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and new beginnings as Gabriel Sterling stood at the construction site in Millbrook. 3 weeks of intensive planning had led to this moment. The skeletal framework of the new factory rose behind him, while stacks of red bricks waited nearby, ready to give substance to his promises. Workers in hard hats moved purposefully across the site, their voices mixing with the steady rhythm of machinery. Many of these same men had lost their jobs here 12 years ago. Now they were back, not just as laborers, but as part of something bigger, a story of redemption. Gabriel adjusted his simple blue work shirt. No designer suits today. His hands trembled slightly as he saw Frank Martinez approaching, a former line supervisor who'd worked at the old factory for 20 years before the shutdown. "Mr. Sterling?" Frank said, his weathered face unreadable. Gabriel extended his hand. "Mr. Martinez, I remember you from the old personnel files, but I wish I'd known you then as a person, not just a number on a spreadsheet." Frank's firm handshake lasted longer than necessary. "Better late than never, I suppose." One by one, other former workers came forward. Gabriel knew each name, had studied their stories, felt the weight of each family's struggle. He apologized to David Chen, whose daughter had to drop out of college, to Maria Rodriguez, who'd lost her house, to William Tucker, who still carried bitterness in his eyes. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the clear blue sky. Cameras rolled as Gabriel stepped up to the temporary podium, but his words weren't crafted by PR teams or focus grouped for maximum impact. 12 years ago, he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, I made decisions from the comfort of a Manhattan boardroom that devastated this community. I told myself it was just business, that numbers on a spreadsheet didn't have faces or families or dreams. He paused, swallowing hard. I was wrong, dead wrong, and while I can't undo the past, I can work to build a different future. This new facility isn't just about jobs, though we'll create hundreds of those. It's about restoring dignity, about recognizing that a community's worth isn't measured in profit margins, but in the strength of its people. The first brick sat on a ceremonial tray beside him. Gabriel picked it up, feeling its solid weight. This brick represents a foundation, not just of a building, but of trust we need to rebuild, of hope we need to restore, of wounds we need to heal. He walked to the designated spot and, under the guidance of a master mason, carefully laid the brick in place. The cameras clicked and whirred, but Gabriel wasn't performing for them. His hands moved with reverence, knowing this moment meant something far beyond a photo opportunity. 15 miles away, in her modest living room, Nicole sat cross-legged on her worn couch, watching the broadcast. Her son Tommy pressed against her side, his eyes wide as Gabriel appeared on screen. "Look, Mommy, it's Daddy Gabriel!" Tommy pointed excitedly. "He's building something big!" Nicole's heart clenched at the name. She'd tried to explain their separation to Tommy. But how do you tell a child that adult relationships are complicated? That sometimes love isn't enough when it's tangled with pain and history? "Yes, honey," she said softly, running her fingers through his hair. "He is building something big." On screen, Gabriel continued speaking about community programs, training initiatives, and scholarship funds. But it was the way he looked at the people around him that caught Nicole's attention. The genuine remorse in his eyes, the humility in his posture, the determination in his voice. "Is he coming back now?" Tommy asked, turning to look up at her with hope shining in his eyes. "Since he's making things better." Nicole pulled her son closer, breathing in the sweet scent of his shampoo. "I don't know, sweetheart." But her voice wavered, uncertainty mixing with something that felt dangerously like hope. She watched as Gabriel shook more hands, listened intently to people's stories, and showed genuine interest in the construction plans. This wasn't the distant billionaire she'd first met, nor even the man who'd proposed to her at the gala. This was someone new, someone who'd faced his mistakes and chosen to change, not just with words, but with actions that cost him dearly. Tommy snuggled closer, yawning. "I miss him, Mummy. He makes good pancakes. Well, okay ones. Yours are better." Nicole smiled despite herself, remembering Gabriel's awkward attempts in the kitchen, his determination to learn, his joy when something turned out right. The memories brought an ache to her chest, not the sharp pain of betrayal anymore, but something softer, more complex. On the television, the ceremony was winding down. The cameras caught one final shot of Gabriel, standing alone by the newly laid brick, his expression thoughtful and determined. Nicole found herself touching the screen, her fingers tracing the outline of his face before she caught herself and pulled back. "We'll see, Tommy," she whispered, as much to herself as to her son. "We'll see." The autumn sun cast long shadows across the newly paved parking lot of Sterling Industries' rebuilt factory. 6 months of construction had transformed the empty lot into a symbol of renewal, its red brick walls and gleaming windows standing proud against the morning sky. Gabriel Sterling shifted uncomfortably at the podium, tugging at his tie. Unlike his usual tailored suits, today he wore a simple blue button-down and khakis, clothes that felt more appropriate for speaking to the community he'd once wronged. His eyes scanned the gathered crowd of 300 people, searching for 2 faces in particular, though he tried not to let his disappointment show when he couldn't find them. "When I was a younger man," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed audience, "I thought success meant bigger profits and taller buildings. I measured worth in stock prices and quarterly reports." He paused, letting his gaze meet the eyes of former workers who'd returned for the ceremony. "I was wrong. Dead wrong." The microphone picked up his shaky breath. "Success isn't about what you build, it's about who you build it with. It's about family, community, and the courage to admit when you've lost your way." In the back row, a door quietly opened. Gabriel's heart skipped as he caught a glimpse of familiar dark hair, but he forced himself to continue speaking. "Faith taught me that redemption isn't just about saying sorry. It's about making things right. This factory isn't charity. It's restoration. It's hope made real in brick and steel." Tommy's excited whisper carried across the quiet room. "Mommy, there he is." Gabriel's voice wavered as he spotted them, Nicole holding her son's hand, standing quietly at the back of the room. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and even from a distance he could see the cautious hope in her eyes. "The hardest lesson I've learned," Gabriel continued, fighting to keep his composure, "is that wealth means nothing without love. That power means nothing without purpose. That success means nothing if you've forgotten how to open your heart." Tommy bounced on his toes, straining against his mother's grip. Nicole whispered something to him, but the boy's excitement couldn't be contained. "And so today, as we dedicate this facility, I'm not just opening a factory. I'm opening my heart to this community, asking for a chance to be part of your future, to—" "Daddy!" Tommy's voice rang out as he broke free from Nicole's grasp. The boy darted down the center aisle, his small shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Gabriel barely had time to step away from the podium before Tommy launched himself forward. Kneeling down, Gabriel caught the boy in his arms, holding him close as tears spilled freely down his cheeks. The microphone caught his choked sob, echoing through the speakers. "I missed you, Daddy," Tommy whispered against his neck. "Did you miss us too?" "Every single day, buddy," Gabriel managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Every single minute." The crowd had fallen silent, watching this unscripted moment of raw emotion. Nicole moved slowly down the aisle, her own eyes glistening. When she reached them, Gabriel looked up at her, still holding Tommy close. "Nicole," he whispered, though the microphone carried his words to every corner of the room. "I'm so sorry. For everything." She knelt beside them, her hand gentle on his cheek. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You gave us a future." Tommy wiggled between them, his small hands linking theirs together. Nicole's lips curved into a tender smile as she leaned closer to Gabriel's ear. "And yes," she whispered, her voice carrying a warmth that made his heart soar, "I'll give you those 5 sons." Gabriel's laugh came out half-sob as he pulled them both closer, not caring about the cameras or the crowd or anything else in that moment. Tommy's arms wrapped around both their necks, creating a circle of love and forgiveness that felt more precious than any wealth he'd ever known. The audience burst into applause, their cheers echoing off the factory walls. But Gabriel barely heard them. His world had narrowed to the feeling of Nicole's hand in his, Tommy's warm weight against his chest, and the promise of a future filled with the love he'd denied himself for so long. The gentle spring breeze carried the sound of hymns through the open church windows as Gabriel, Nicole, and Tommy made their way up the worn stone steps. It was their 4th Sunday as a family, but each visit felt more natural than the last. Inside, the wooden pews gleamed in the morning light. Tommy proudly led the way, tugging Gabriel's hand as he spotted familiar faces. "This is my daddy," he announced to Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who had worked in the old factory's cafeteria. Her weathered face creased with joy as she patted Gabriel's arm. "We've been blessed by your changes, Mr. Sterling," she said warmly. "My grandson just started at the new facility last week." Gabriel's throat tightened with emotion. "Please, call me Gabriel." They found their usual spot, 3 rows from the front. The familiar scent of polished wood and old hymnals wrapped around them as they settled in. Tommy nestled between them, his small hand still firmly gripping Gabriel's larger one. When the congregation rose for prayer, Gabriel felt Nicole's fingers intertwine with his free hand. They knelt together on the worn cushions, and for the first time in his life, Gabriel felt truly part of something bigger than himself. Around them sat the very people whose lives his past decisions had affected. Factory workers, their families, shopkeepers who had struggled when the town's economy collapsed. But now, their faces held hope instead of hardship. The new factory had brought more than just jobs. It had restored dignity and purpose to the community. "Look, Daddy," Tommy whispered during a quiet moment, pointing to where sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, creating patterns of gold and ruby on the floor. "It's like God's painting." Gabriel squeezed his hand gently. "It sure is, buddy." After the service, they joined the crowd flowing out into the bright morning sunshine. Tommy ran ahead to play with other children on the church lawn, while Gabriel and Nicole walked hand in hand down the stone path. "I never knew life could feel this complete," Gabriel said softly, watching Tommy's joyful face as he chased butterflies with his friends. Nicole leaned her head against his shoulder. "God had a plan all along, even when it seemed impossible." 5 sons, you said. Gabriel teased gently, his eyes twinkling. "We might need a bigger house than the penthouse." Nicole's laugh rang out clear and bright. "Maybe we should start with a wedding first." The morning sunlight caught her engagement ring, sending sparkles dancing across their joined hands. Around them, the community they'd helped rebuild buzzed with life and possibility. Children played, families chatted, and the newly reopened factory stood proud against the horizon, a symbol of redemption and renewal. Gabriel pulled Nicole closer, feeling truly whole for the first time in his life. Here, surrounded by love and faith, he was no longer just a successful businessman or a lonely billionaire. He was simply a man blessed with the family he'd always longed for, living, proof that it's never too late for a heart to heal. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.